yeah, your school district too. That's helpful. So the recording started. So again, yeah, make sure you're muted. We're happy to see you all here. I'm Jennifer Bell, the new math assessment specialist. As of Monday, I will have been at ODE for 1 month. So I'm very excited to have joined the team. And both Mark and I are on the west side of the state, so it's fun to talk with people from all over the place. So as you put your school district in, if it's not clear what town you're in, I would love it if you would add that so that we can get a sense for where everybody is. And Mark, I'll have you introduce yourself and then I'll take it back.
All right. Thanks. And we're excited to have Jennifer on board to be able to present. And it's been fun to also interact with people today. My name is Mark Freed, math education specialist here at the Oregon Department of Education. So I've been here since 2009. Common Core and the standards revision 2021 and the instructional materials review processes. So those and are excited to come and share today as well. We'll focus on K-8 systems.
Mm-hmm. And I got to interact with Mark as a middle school math teacher and then as a math TOSA in the Oregon City School District. Well, before that, I was in Lake Oswego teaching middle school math and then as an elementary math coach. So lots of really good work's been done in Oregon in the last so many years. So although I'm new to ODE, I'm familiar with a lot of these resources and I've used them recently with kids and teachers. So we're excited to share some things with you. And as with any presentation, our goal is that you walk away with something that you can use right away. So hopefully you will find at least that one thing as we get going. So let's move on to the next slide. Looks like we've got Pendleton, Morrow County, Milton Freewater represented. Thank you again for putting your name and your school district in there so we know who's here and you get credit for being here. Looks like we might have one more person in the waiting room. Oh, there we go. So we like to follow the CASEL 3 signature practices with our presentations where we have a warm welcome, engaging practices, and optimistic closure. And this is a structure that can be used in any lesson or any learning opportunity where you really make sure everyone feels included and that there's clear closure at the end. So we'll be asking you to share your math story. And then as we go through, our big essential question is, how do your adopted instructional materials support these things? So we're going to talk about the current context in Oregon, social emotional learning standards, the Adolescent Literacy Framework, and the STEAM Toolkit. Those last three things are resources from ODE that we want to share. And again, our hope is that you find that nugget that you can use right away. And then our closure will be asking you about, what do you want to see? What do you want your students to say in the future? So hopefully one of those ideas will spark a goal for your future students. Next slide. An interesting quote from Bell Hooks. To teach in a manner that respects and cares for the souls of our students is essential if we are to provide the necessary conditions where learning can most deeply and intimately begin. Think about your math story. How was your soul cared for or not? If you feel comfortable, feel free to put a note in the chat about what stands out to you from your K-12 math experience. We're a small enough group. If you want to come off mute and share, you're welcome to. We know it's Friday afternoon. We understand if you'd prefer the chat or listening. When I think about my K-12 math story, I was fortunate to have lots of encouragement, but I don't think anyone cared about my soul or if I was happy when it came to math.
I think just for my math story, I'm thinking about like when when I was in fifth grade, like I think it was like fourth or fifth grade, and they had like the California Basic Skills test here, and they had the grade level equivalency. So I found myself in a strange position where I always did well in math, and so it was probably not surprising, maybe a math major and stuff like that. Like I was like a 12th grade and like proficiency on this grade level in elementary school. But at the same time, I was reading at a first grade level. So it's like I don't think I had this, I had the full spectrum of my reading and math. And so I think what was interesting for me is like how much my identity and how teachers responded to me was through like they always thought I was smart. They would say like you're quick, but they were looking at my math skills, and I don't think they always looked at like I struggled in reading. I struggled in a lot of this comprehension. So if you look holistically, it seemed like it was like they were looking at half my identity. Um, but I had a fourth grade teacher who cared very much about me and helped me make a lot of strides. And so, but it was important to have that in my part of my story, I think, to be caught up on that area.
And I like to think that we're starting to, or have been, seeing students more holistically, that there are more aspects to achievement, more access, or more aspects to what's going to connect with students. Um, so be thinking about your math story and how it connects to your work. And we'll just keep going. And I think I think this slide's mine still too.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Good.
Again, I had the privilege of being on the district side and benefiting from the work of ODE. And Mark has led this project of called the Oregon Math Project. And so if you haven't heard of it, it's really a big umbrella term for all of the work that's been done across K-12 and connecting to higher education. And it's all about creating more equitable systems, turning our math system from a filter where we sort and rank students into a pump where we pump out more kids that are comfortable with math, that are ready to move on to the next levels, that have all their doors open because they haven't been filtered out through our system. And part of the project came up with these four cornerstones: focus, engagement, pathways, and belonging. And so we'll be addressing different aspects of those as we share some resources with you. Okay. The next slide. So again, math assessment is my title. And I believe, and again, I've only been here at ODE a month, but in my previous experience too, I really believe that the assessment we have now matches our priorities. So we have the 4 claims that are reported out kind of in 3 areas. Claim 1 is concepts and procedures. So that's your content standards at each grade level. Then we do assess the math practices. We include problem solving and modeling and data analysis with claims 2 and 4 that are reported together. And then claim 3 is communicating reasoning. We need people in our society that can communicate their reasoning, and math is a great place to practice explaining your thinking, critiquing the reasoning of others, and learning how to do that respectfully. Next slide. Just want to share a couple of kind of technical resources. The math test blueprint is available on the math assessment webpage, and I'll stick that in the chat in a minute. But it outlines the priority standards for each grade level and tells you how many test items will be on the test for each area. It also includes the depth of knowledge level. Very few of our assessment items are at a DOK1. The depth of knowledge expected of our standards and that matches our assessment is at a much higher level. So it used to be, I can't teach this way, I can't go deeper because I need to cover all this stuff because of the state test. That's not true anymore. The test matches the priorities and does have a smaller number of items, a smaller number of priorities, so you can go deeper, you can focus. It's important to note that the supporting standards shouldn't be skipped. They are often applications of those priority standards or the conceptual underpinnings of an introduction to the next year's grade level. So you want to see those as well. And then the next slide talks about the Math Target Explorer. This is an Excel file that will give you access to all the claims for all the grade levels, all the targets, and includes the achievement level descriptors for each claim. So if you're not sure exactly like what does this standard mean, there are lots of resources with the standards, but if you want to know what it's going to look like on the test and what's a 3, what's a 2, what's a 4, it's in this document. There's also some suggestions for math performance tasks, one for each grade level, 3 through 8, and in 11th grade, that you could use for your use for your local performance assessment requirement. That it could be something else, but here's a resource that you could use. Remember that you do need to do a problem-solving task that's scored with a rubric at least once in grades 3 through 8 and once in high school. That requirement is still there, part of Division 22. Again, here's a resource for that, and we'll share a few other things that could certainly be turned into problem solving tasks. So again, we've got some nice systemic resources we're pointed in the same direction is the goal. I think we'll switch it back to Mark with a little more context.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. One of the things we've been talking about, like you'll hear more in the coming months as we talk about like Senate Bill 141 and accountability, like this idea of access to grade level content and high quality instructional materials are going to come up a lot. You're hearing about those. So I think I just wanted to use this opportunity to share a little bit more my understanding of these ideas at this time, and you'll see this in like I believe vision documents and communications in the near future. But for math, when I think about like access to grade level content, there's 2 reports I would point to, just kind of thinking like these are important to kind of like hold and kind of make sense of. One is the opportunity myth by the new TNTP, so the New Teachers Project, and this was about I think both these came out about 2018 and 19, right before the pandemic shut down time frame, but they're still very relevant. And so what I find interesting in the 2 reports is they offer 2 different kind of analyses of grade level content, and almost paradoxically contradicting kind of like issues of slowing down instruction and the need to speed up. So it's kind of like, how can we do both at the same time? It's kind of what we're noticing. And so the opportunity myth analyzed like I would have to look like how many classrooms. It was a lot. It was hundreds of classrooms. I know, like in K-8, and they analyzed the instruction. They analyzed the work the students were doing in class. They interviewed teachers and students. So it was a lot of research that went into like question being like, what content is students having access to in the class? So the opportunity myth is the idea of like if you're enrolled in a 4th grade class, you believe you have an opportunity to learn 4th grade content. And what they found is, in basically across the grade levels, the majority of the time was actually spent on off grade level content. And so like that's that 65%, I think, like on the or I have to remember the percentages there, but like more time was spent on basically like reviewing content. The question begs a question like, at what point is like this grade level class not really grade level class if we're doing prior work? And so they found this was also a trend of classrooms with high students of color or lower socioeconomic status for students, like that instruction time was even smaller on grade level for those students. So the students who needed more actually got less instructional time. And so they making a case like we need to get students up, like encourage them to like, how can we get more instructional time on grade level? The iceberg problem on their side was like the noting like we have a system that is built around grade level math and accountability. And so there is a pressure to speed up. Like a student might be a grade level behind, but we're going to like try to move them up a grade. And I would say even in the middle grades in high school, there is pressure to skip a grade, to skip a year of middle school basically and put them into like high school or 2 years of college and before they graduate high school. So somehow like in our system, we have this pressure to not only get them to grade level, but we want to get them beyond the grade level. So if we're actually teaching content they might see in a later class, that shrinks that window of grade level content even more. And so I think one of the things we're looking at, I think the dual reality here is like we need to make like how can we maximize time on grade level content so students are coming in, accessing the content. So one thing that I would just note that's happening in college is that same issue with students coming in like in remedial math classes when the students graduate from college. Um, 3 or 4 years of classes that they have to go through before they get grade level like high college level content. But what they're looking at is like it's like 60% of our students are getting placed into remedial classes after they graduate. So it's a majority of our students are being placed below grade level content basically. And they're finding is like, well, let's try putting them in the 1 hour level class. Let's put them in the grade level class, but let's do it with supports. So they call it co-requisites in college. And so that's been actually really promising. I think like they're finding like a lot of students who may have 3 or 4 years of prerequisites are doing well and succeeding in college content. So access to grade level content, providing differentiation within the class, co-requisite support, just-in-time learning, access to interesting applied learning are all strategies to help increase that on-grade level time.
And these are things we often find are in place in K-8 that are less likely to be in place in our secondary spaces. So when I encourage people to keep doing the intervention, keep doing the support, but remember it's got to be in service of grade level content, especially those priority standards.
Mhm.
And then I think, yeah, keep going.
Yeah, so the next slide, I think just kind of naming like the when you hear about high quality instructional materials. So what we're talking about there is like after working with the materials for a while, I think I've come to appreciate it takes a lot of work to make a good instructional material. It takes a lot, like it, and it takes a special kind of person sometimes to like author, I think, materials. And so I think when we're thinking about like, our K-12 system, I think we have like that, have put on our teachers a lot of pressure to like create their own materials or determine like a lot of their worksheets. And so that is going to, oftentimes, if teachers are creating their materials, they're going to create it at a lower DOK level than what the standard requires, or they're going to do it at prior grade levels. So I think by first having a grade level high quality material in place helps, aligned to grade level content, and then learning like how do we use the material, how do we use these materials to support our students. And it's not a script. It's not talking about like just follow the steps 1, 2, 3, but it is. I think we use the metaphor like a chef, creating like chef gets raw materials and they're able to make a dish, but there is a recipe. There is a recipe they follow. They have good quality materials. There's nuances that you could tweak. Like we all have a lasagna recipe we could make. We're nuances that we could choose to modify in little ways, but there's a fundamental like um, structure that underlines what we're working on. And so that allows for people who are new, like new cooks or new teachers, they can map onto that quicker, and also then provide more consistency from one classroom to the next. So what we find is a lot of materials, like a lot of teachers spend, this is from the Ed Reports study in 2019, like a lot of teachers are spending time making their own materials. I think it's like 5 to 7 hours a week. And then they're disconnect. Oftentimes, what they're doing is disconnected from their learning. We're going to learn this high quality. We're going to learn this instructional practice, but they never talk about what does this look like in my materials. And so I think we talk about curriculum-based professional learning, where we are basing the learning in the instructional materials. So I think you'll see more focus on the idea of like, if we're going to talk about student discourse. Here's a strategy we're going to talk about in the class. Here's an opportunity to work with it in your materials that you have in front of you. So you make that connection in the professional learning. So that is hopefully increasing the quality of professional learning we'll see in our state as well. So that is, it's tiring. If you're trying to make all materials, you're going to burn yourself out. So the benefits of high quality materials, I mean, so you can see like it's more, it's actually one of the, from a cost benefit analysis, it's one of the highest bang for our bucks we can get in terms of like increasing student achievement is like getting quality materials in the classroom and helping teachers understand and implement them and where they can tweak and what boundaries they may have to stay within the grade level mathematics is has been shown to be like a really effective strategy in places we've seen in other states like Louisiana as a model like we've and that's done a lot of high quality instructional materials work and so um, I think we're looking to learn from them. We're talking with our states, and so look for more of that. But I think that's something that is going to be like even like reviewing the way we do our state list is something we're talking about now. So how can we help provide a narrower list, or how can we have a shorter list and provide more supports is something that is certainly on the table that we're talking about OD right now. Um, this is so this the seed survey. So I think one of the things we were looking at, like the seed survey has a couple items that like in terms of like students being able to show their thinking or be able to like I think NAEP has a couple questions like enjoying math or being able to do higher order thinking. And I think what we see places where we can that's it, have opportunities to learn is important. So like I don't know, so different ways to show like we want students to have different ways to show their thinking, different strategies, building on like, so I think pathways we talk about in high school in terms of agency and choice. I think that idea, like pathways in K-8 to me is like agency and choice in terms of ways you can show your thinking or tools you can use. And so there are connections that we hope to connect in that pathways conversation from K-8 to high school. So I'm not sure, is there anything else you want to add about the seed survey, Jennifer, or?
No, I just think it's really interesting. This is like fresh information from
Mhm.
last year's kids, and noticing that at fourth and seventh grade, the vast majority feel like they are getting help when they need it, that
Mhm.
they are given opportunities to use different ways to show their thinking on math problems. And that's encouraging.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And I think it's like this one more like so Senate Bill 141. Um Senate Bill 141 is the Oregon accountability law. So what it's big, it's a lot of work here at OD. We're doing a lot of work internally, and and I think one of the big headlines I would just say in terms of math is we are going to be adding a metric eighth grade math to the list. So we've added in addition to like third grade reading, ninth grade on track, and 4-year graduation rates, we're adding eighth grade math is going to be new. K2 attendance is going to be new, and a local metric that districts are going to adopt. So there's going to be a lot more focus on eighth grade math. So one of the reasons why I chose like this session to be, I named like elementary or K8. Um, I think how do we think of K-8 as the trajectory to that successful eighth grade metric is something that's like I think we all can own. And I think if you look at our state data in terms of like where the highest and lowest scores are, it's like the highest scores are generally in the lower grades, like in third grade math, and then each year you kind of see it like percent proficiencies kind of go down. So how can like as students stay in the system longer, how can we help students stay proficient and then increase, like that would change the trajectory of eighth grade significantly. So I like thinking of the eighth grade being like 8 years to get to this pivot point. And that in that eighth grade years, like if we can get students that proficiency, that sets them up for success in all the high school pathway work we're talking about. So it's like that is the metric that we want to get them because if they can get through eighth grade math, they get through Algebra 1, basically our assumptions are that is the gateway to courses happening later. So the next slide I just put on here is the 2+1 model, so you're aware of it. If you um, might hear high school, I don't know if you may have heard of it or the high school teachers talking about, but instead of like my elevator pitch on this is like instead of like algebra, geometry, algebra 2, we're integrate 1, 2, 3. The question we asked in high school is like, how much math do all students need to know after eighth grade? So eighth grade is important. Let's get all our students are proficient at that level. How much new content after that do we want to teach students? And then at what point can students start to specialize? So the answer we have for the 21 revision was two credits of core math for high school, 1 year, 1 credit of algebra work, half credit geometry, and half credit data for all students in the first 2 courses. And then after that, the +1 is an elective course that they can choose. If they want to choose a pathway to calculus, then like algebra 2 and pre-calculus, set them up for that path, a data pathway, and a quantitative reasoning pathway. So one of the changes we did do in K-12, we have a data reasoning progression, for example, was added. That's different from the Common Core. And that progression was intentionally designed to lead to this semester experience in high school and like the data pathway after that. So trying to hope to bring some coherence across the system in terms of that work. So it's exciting work happening in the high school level, but I just want to make sure everyone knows kind of like high school and colleges are changing too, in terms of the work, and data is going to be more important. We're definitely increasing the emphasis on data, and giving people choice and application in all grades is going to set them up well for the future classes we're designing.
So we just went through a whole bunch of kind of the Oregon context, the national context. I'm just curious if you could just put a number in the chat. 5, I was completely familiar with everything that was just shared. I already knew all that. 1, I didn't know any of it. So if you could just do somewhere between a 1 and a 5, how familiar was all of that to you? Hoping that it was at least a little bit familiar, but that there might have been some new pieces. So we talked about the assessment, we talked about some of the research, we talked about high quality instructional materials, we talked about the seed survey, House Bill 141 or Senate Bill 141, and pathways. I see people typing. Thank you. So just 1 through 5. 5, I already knew all that. 1, I didn't know any of it. And then we'll jump into, there we go. I like pie. Thank you for that answer. I appreciate that.
3, 4.
Gary
not
gets
6,
the gold
7,
star for the day.
7.
Okay, that makes me feel better. That's good. If it was all 5s, I was gonna feel bad. So thank you, and I appreciate your signs of life. I have a college student that doesn't always give us signs of life, so I appreciate you putting that in there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for noting the data stat. So definitely, I would say like those data standards in the K-5 standards in middle school. Yeah, take a look at those. Those are threaded all the way up to high school. That was the design of those. So the foundations in elementary and middle school will help them in the future classes.
It's exciting work. It's moving towards the current math that we need. So great. Thank you. Good. All right. So the next section we wanted to share with you are some resources around transformative social and emotional learning. And the Oregon social emotional learning standards are all built on the CASEL work, and that's the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning. And it's rooted in equity, it's rooted in research, but it really emphasizes that transformative social emotional learning is a process. So it's not about just one time of day or just one person in a school. It's about all of the kids and adults and community coming together to transform, to build those lasting relationships and all of those pieces. So it's about facilitating co-learning. It's about critically examining the root causes of inequities and about developing collaborative solutions. So the goal is that personal, community, and societal well-being, and it can happen in your math space. Go on to the next slide. These are the key components of the framework. Notice the drawing there, that it's built on, strong roots of guiding principles, but it takes that adult social emotional learning to hold the student social emotional learning, and that it's all built on conditions for learning and thriving for everyone in our system. And I'll say this is aspirational right now. We've got all sorts of challenges in our communities that need to be addressed and that people are working hard to do. But we have some resources that can help give some ideas to meet these goals. So again, it's not just about the kids, but about creating space for the adults as well. Go to the next slide. And then these are the competencies and focal constructs. So you can see the castle is the round one. So that comes from the national organization. And then the Oregon version is this braid. So we've got competencies or standards described for self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. But they're built on these important ideas or values of identity, agency, belonging, collaborative problem solving, and curiosity. These are all things we want to see in math class. When students are collaboratively solving problems, they need to have self-awareness. They need to manage themselves. They need social awareness. They need to use relationship skills and ultimately make some responsible decisions about how to solve problems together. And all of those other things on the other side are important pieces. If kids don't have a strong sense of their identity and feel a sense of belonging and have agency, they're not going to be able to participate fully in our math classes. So there's lots of connections. And I'm going to pass it
Yeah,
back to Mark to make some more connections and give you
yeah,
some more resources.
yeah. When I saw this thread, I was thinking like in my context, I'm thinking about the math standards. Like we talk about math standards and we have math practices. Like a standard is something we want students to know, and a practice is things we want students to do. And so there is that kind of parallel. It's not exactly the same, but those constructs are practices. We want students to be curious. We want students to have agency. We want students to have identity. And same for that's for students' social emotional learning. If we're talking about adults or teachers, like we want to have teachers have identities. What's your identity as a math person, as a teacher, and then as a student? So both of these have like a adult and a student kind of component to them, but they're practices. And I think when I saw these, I saw like we'll share in a moment like the connections to the math practices, but that's where that started from. It's kind of like, oh, like problem solving. It's a practice. Like how do we problem solve? And so that was something that we started like thinking about math practices and how they intersect with these um, TSEL standards that we have adopted. So I think we'll just take a moment. I think it's like as we think about your stories, thinking about like how uh, these ideas from the TSEL framework, like agency and identity and belonging, fit into your story. So like I I knew like I felt like a math person. I belonged when, like I was able to like quickly answer a problem or be able to like, memorize my facts or like I I think that was something that made me feel like I belonged. But then part of my identity is like I knew I had that for the math side, but I didn't have it on the reading side. I knew it's like there's like this dual identity I had in my head. So I felt like I belonged in math, but I didn't feel like necessarily felt like I belonged in reading. And I think there's a lot of students who may feel the reverse. They have like these different identities that they may hold simultaneously. That's kind of one thing I was thinking about in terms of um, like in the areas I didn't feel like I belonged, it was hard to be curious.
Mhm.
Like it was hard to be like curious about like fiction novels the same. But I was curious. I was easier for me when felt like I belonged and that was who I am. Then I was more risk taking, try new things, do things on my own. And so I think there's that connection, like how I wonder how I could like have done better in terms of like my reading identity, for example.
Mhm.
How that, but as I got better in that, it helped in the other areas as well.
Yeah, my story, K8, I felt very comfortable. And then in high school, took a computer science class where I very clearly did not have the same identity as the majority of the students in the classroom. And it was hard to
Mm.
push to belong in that space and to feel curious because there was so much else going on. And I'm sure, we've all had different experiences where we've felt more or less comfortable in different spaces. And these standards and these resources give us some tools to help more kids feel more comfortable in more spaces. I think we can go on to
Good.
the next one.
All right. So I wanted to give you a chance to look at some a worksheet that we did. So this was based off of presentation that we did at the Northwest Math Conference where I worked on with our team here working on the transformative social emotional learning to create a crosswalk between the math standards and the transformative social emotional standards, TSEL. So my curiosity was like, if we were doing all the math practices, how much of the TSEL are we doing just naturally? So like, I didn't want to think like we have to do math in this bucket, and then we're going to stop and we're going to do transformative social emotional learning from 3 to 5 on Fridays or something like that. So it's kind of like, well, if we're doing the math practices, how much of that is aligned to the content standards? So you'll see that crosswalk between the standards themselves and the math practices. And so we tried to like show like I think we're over halfway there if we're doing all the practices. It's kind of what that was that analysis we kind of were looking at. And then the other resource that kind of led into that was the development of this teacher's guide for mathematics and TSEL. So I think this is another one we'll put in the chat as well. And it has its roots in that original document. You'll find that because we're the same team, we're working on it together. But it looks nicer because it had graphics and things like that. So it's a little bit more cleaned up and it's designed specifically for mathematics. And so I think what I was going to propose is give you a chance to look at these documents and come back and like let's we have a couple questions in terms of like how do you see this fitting within your routines? How does this connect to your instructional materials? And so um, I think that was yeah we have some reflection questions on there. But is there anything particular you want to make sure to point out in these documents, Jennifer?
No, I just think they are, again, just such great tools to make the connections explicit between the math practices and the TESOL standards. So this is kind of a choose your own adventure. This is not a super short document. So we've identified the areas that we think would be the most interesting, but you're adults, find what works for you. I'm going to set a 7-minute timer and then we'll come back. But anytime within those next 7 minutes, if there's something that stands out to you that you want to put in the chat, let us know what you're finding that you think, oh, I can do this. That's a great idea. That sort of thing. Even if it's something that you already do, those are things that can be validating for others as well. So
That's
we'll,
about 2:45 then. That works, right?
yes,
All right.
that sounds great.
Okay. All right. I think it's like 2:45. I was like, one thing I noticed is looking at our Word document, that the Google Doc, and the one that's in the final, like the tables for the math practices, and TSEL made it in both, but I kind of like the color coding. It's like, I don't know if that made it over or not, but that's what I'm realizing. But we were really intentional trying to like what words in the standard math practice like connect to the TSEL. And so hopefully that color coding is helpful in the Google Doc. And then there's a table at the end that we try to say count up like which TSEL standards seem to be popping up the most. And I think like like just doing the math practice, like TSEL like 2 and 5 come up a lot. So those are things that we were trying to like make those connections on. But I'm curious what other insights or things you might notice as you look at these documents.
Even just yes or no, do you feel like your instructional materials have resources to support this kind of thing? But it takes a little more time, right? So
Mhm.
you have to intentionally choose the pieces that fit.
And hopefully like the intent was to show that things that we should be doing, like things we want to do in math class are consistent with that, but just been hopefully raise the self-awareness of things that we're doing. And maybe there's some gaps, like some areas that we might still need to attend to if we're going to do TSEL fully in our math classrooms, but there are a lot of connections that are natural that we wanted to highlight.
Thanks, Ruth. I think that the key word there is adapted, right? So the bones are there, but a little
Mhm.
adaptation can, really illuminate these skills and support kids their skills to be learned. I think whenever I've gone to sessions around social emotional learning, it it often comes up, okay, adults, do you feel like you've completely arrived? And most people, we all have room to learn and grow, especially when it comes to social emotional learning. Thank you. All right, should we switch to the adolescent literacy framework?
All right. Yeah.
Here we go. So I just put a link in the chat to this document. It is a really long document with lots of really interesting pieces. And those of you that work with early elementary may have seen the early literacy framework and lots of important specific information about literacy there. But this document addresses all the subjects and literacy in a more holistic way. So, Mark, if you want to go to the next slide, um, the the emphasis in this one is around disciplinary literacy, and it talks about what disciplinary literacy looks like in social studies and in science and in CTE. So there's some resources for those other subjects too, but of course we were focused on math. And disciplinary literacy in math is about going back and forth between written and spoken language and the language of mathematics, and developing those skills allows students to gain new knowledge, but through problem solving and logical reasoning. Um, and so that's in that document. And then as we think about mathematical disciplinary literacy, math text is dense and it's not like reading a novel. Even a story problem is its own kind of genre of writing that needs to be explicitly taught the structures of story problems, the symbolic language, what explicit teaching is needed so that students understand those symbols and what they're for. Mathematics has logical structure. So you might have formal type proof or flow charts or more informal proofs with statements and reasons for constructing arguments. Again, the Writing can be very dense in math, so using scaffolds like chunking or other tools can help students access the concepts and the information that might come in a mathematical text or a math book. Um, Multiple representations are common in mathematics. So you've got your graph, your equation, your verbal description of things. And for students at all levels, making the connections between them is really where that power is. Um, Precision and accuracy, um, are often an interesting thing, especially as we focus more on just conceptual understanding and multiple strategies. But accuracy is still important, and making connections to college and career can really motivate that. Like, you know, um, the bridge is going to fall down, right? If we don't make accurate, have accurate answers, and if we aren't careful with our units and our measurements and all of those things. Um, Students can do research and evaluation in math. They can explore concepts, look at multiple sources, and learn what other people have done before with these ideas. And then sense making and repetition is an important part of mathematical text. So you can use graphic organizers to help students see that structure and get the information that they need. So there's a lot more detail on pages 116 to 118 of that document. So, Mark, let's go to the next one. So we'd like to, again, give you some time to look at these things, especially those strategies that are on pages 114 to 123. Which of them could you use with the instructional materials you have? And how would they support the TSEL standards and the ELA standards in addition to the math standards? I'd like to do a temperature check. With cameras off, it's hard to tell. So would you like, actually, how about in the chat, put how many minutes you would like to have to review this resource? Maximum of 7. So 0 if you want us to just keep going, 7 if you'd like some time to explore. Okay, 3 to 5, thank you. Okay, thank you for being honest there. Be a couple more. Okay, my quick averaging says 2. So we're going to just stop talking for 2 minutes. If you need to just use the time to stand up and stretch, 2 minutes. So we'll be back at 2:54.
I think one of the things that I thought about, because I helped provide feedback on this document from the math perspective, and just thinking about how do we write, how do we read, write, and communicate in math? And so, like, just naming something like how like creating like step-by-step logical kind of instructions. So that could be like reading, like an IKEA instruction manual or something like that. That's very mathematical in terms of like how we structure our writing. It's a different way of writing. Like if you have like essays like how to make a peanut butter sandwich kind of essay, it's like that is a mathematical type of writing. And so we want to be able, like, that's how we communicate in mathematics. Like, here's our assumptions. Here's step one. Here's step two. And it kind of flows. That's kind of it can be deductive or inductive kind of writing, but it's like that step-by-step process is something I think we can own in our math instruction time. And it doesn't always, I mean, having students write a better, like, how to make a peanut butter sandwich is going to help them with math if we make that connection, help them making the connection to the math arguments. And so that's one type of writing and communicating I think about. The other one I think about is I like thinking like how we have like I played video games, very linear kind of video games, and we have like these save points that you might have. And so like you play the game and you get to a save point, and when I come back to the game, I don't have to start over from the first one. That's what happened in the Super Mario in the 80s and stuff like that. I always start over. But once you have that save point, it's like you can come back and get to that save point and you can move on. And we do that in math as well. It's like that's the idea of like we have like theorems and like we have like we don't have to prove Pythagoras theorem all over and over again. We can assume it. Like you can assume it's a truth, but there is an exercise like before that, like how do we prove it once or how we prove it, and then once we get to it, then we can save it. And so things like in elementary school, you could do, I think it's a worthwhile, you know, exercise to think about things like, if I add two numbers together, what kind of number do we get? Or if I add two odd numbers, like how do we prove something like that? Like I know 7 plus 5 is like, how do we kind of get to that point where we can say like two odd numbers is the even number? But once you get to that proof, you can save it and we can use it. And so you don't have to prove it over and over again. And that's kind of one way we work at kind of think and read and write and as mathematicians that I think is spilled over into other areas of our lives as well.
We had one more slide on the Adolescent Literacy Framework that's exactly what you were just talking about, that communicating like a mathematician. So, and it might be communicating to prove a big idea or to prove an abstraction or a conjecture, or it could be to just share different ideas and work together to solve a problem. So there's some more resources there in that document about communicating like a mathematician, facilitating discussions, but also developing presentation skills is a piece of the mathematician profession would be being able to stand up and explain your math thinking. But it also requires active listening. We want students to learn how to listen to each other and gain ideas from each other and learn about math. And multiple representations, again, are an important piece. And then practicing public engagement, looking for authentic audiences for the work that students do in our math classes can allow them that opportunity to communicate their reasoning with purpose and can make a difference. I will say, Mark, I don't play much video games and my family does, and they often tell me, oh, I can't stop. I got to find a save room. But sometimes that's not true. Sometimes they really could just stop. So
I do experience that as a parent trying to come on, get off your like just hit a save point. I can't do it, but
so we're going to ask you to find the save room right now and set aside the Adolescent Literacy Framework. And we've got one more document to share with you, the STEAM Toolkit. So some more resources.
yeah. And I just put in the link as well, the Adolescent Literacy Framework website that has a lot more resources and bank if you want to like explore it. And there are math specific resources and there's resources at different grade levels there. So there's early literacy, there's adolescent literacy. There's also a page on that for TSEL, Transformative Social Emotional Learning. So that's where you'll find the workbook for mathematics, but also there is a Canvas course for TSEL that you can go through and learn about TSEL through Canvas, and it's also designed to work in groups. So groups of people it could be facilitated by a coach or a chair. So those are a lot of resources on that website. So I'll put the link for adolescent, but that same webpage, if you go up on the upper right, you can find the early literacy and TSEL resources as well on that website, and look for math coming soon. So that's going to be coming in the yeah, that's my one of my things I'm gonna be working on this year. So we work on a K-12 math framework, and with the aim to have like I think part of it is like, I would really like to have a math tab. And so we can add a math tab to this website as well. So that work will be coming this next year as well. So the last, I think this is the last one. Yeah, the last resource I'm going to share is the STEAM toolkit. This just came out this last month. I think it was like in January, or February. I was like, what month am I in? So it's just this year. And so the STEAM toolkit is designed to provide a lot of different resources for interconnected learning. What I try to do is like, I think there's a lot of M is in there, math, so um, thinking back to like these cornerstones, the connections to our cornerstones as well. So I think it's like um, pathways, how we can. So in high school, we're talking about course specific kind of choices that you can have, like that +1 choices in high school. I do think there is a pathway connection in K-8. We need to work on it. I think that's part of the framework we're going to work on more. But thinking about a student's journey through math class, as we think about like how we go through math class and thinking about just even making like simple choices, like in terms of like um, you have the same skill, like you're adding two 3-digit numbers together, but giving students a choice of what two 3-digit numbers they can add, or maybe they add larger numbers or they add smaller numbers that kind of like get at like that skill. So that's providing a choice in that opportunity that I would consider as part of kind of like that pathway agency and choice that we can provide students. And so, yes, it is a high school one, and we need to do better communicating what this looks like in K-5. But those are the conversations we're definitely having right now as we think about the framework. Thinking about belonging and identity in STEM. So I think about um, building on students' assets, like, and then also thinking about a kind of a student-centered inquiry kind of math environment is something that we're thinking about. So one of the wonderings I have is like in terms of like practices. We have math practices, we have science practices. Is there kind of STEM practices we're thinking? And there is a lot of similarities between mathematical modeling and like the science practices. But like formulating a question, this you see this in the data standards as well. Kind of like how you go from question to create a model to use that model to collect some information, analyze it, go back and answer the original question. And so those are things that we can kind of think about from a STEM perspective, not just uh, a math specific. And I think that will help. Like I think thinking about these interconnected lessons in elementary school is important. So you don't like how we can create those opportunities to increase um, instruction in like science and careers and things. And so those are things we want to be thinking about K-12. But also, I think the DOK alignment tool, I put that on 66 to 67. I think those pages on the toolkit. Um, that is something we're talking about right now with our standards in terms of like how do we intentionally write our standards to DOK levels? How can that support differentiation in terms of um, like the example I gave with we're adding two 3-digit numbers. Giving students a choice doesn't change the DOK level. It's still the same procedural kind of DOK 1 type activity in that case, but it does provide differentiation. It does provide choice in terms of like I can choose a more difficult number, easier number. So how can we so DOK can mean we still want to have like a procedural kind of DOK 1 experience, but you can introduce things like choice and agency and those ones, and this still maintains the same target for the standard. So I look for like the alignment tool, like the how to differentiate your learning targets is something that you could, I think is another application I think I'll just highlight in this document as well. So I don't know if there's anything else about Steam or if you want to give me, I think they might want to, I don't know the number in the rooms, how many minutes you want to look at this, but
Yeah. We're Yeah, actually, yeah, let's do another temperature check. How much do you want a few minutes to look at this on your own, or do you want us to just keep going? We're nearing the end anyway. So I will say when I think about STEAM, I always worry the M seems silent. And so looking for those opportunities to include math in those STEAM projects is really important. And this is a resource that can give you some ideas on how to do that. I have to be careful. Often the science standards have math connections that are at a future grade level or a previous grade level. And so we always want to be careful that if we're introducing a future concept, that it's done from a place of conceptual understanding and not just teaching a procedure before students have had the opportunity to really learn and understand it.
And I just put a link in terms of like the DOK. This is a website, a tool I found called the differentiator. And so it's like you can click on it and it gives you options to like it creates a learning target for you on the top. And so you can choose different thinking skills, different content areas, resources, products. Um, and that could be something like in a way like you could use as a teacher, like you differentiate your objectives. But another thing to think about is like how students might be able to differentiate. Like if they want to create a different product, that could be something that a way two students could be doing some the similar content skill but expressing in different ways. And so I thought that was just like I like clicking, playing with it or something like that. But if you wanted to play with the content standard, add three-digit numbers and try different ways to create different learning targets, and maybe that could be a place where like choice and agency, like students may have a short list of choices in terms of how they may want to what products they may want to create to show proficiency in this is something that we can um, maintain that kind of like DOK intent of the standard, but yet still give different ways for students to show proficiency on it. So it's a cool little website tool. I'm gonna play that. I was like playing with that earlier today on DOK.
That's fun. The tech tools that we have access to now can really help us as teachers come up with more creative ideas to meet students' needs. I just want to ground us again in your high quality instructional materials. So
Hmm.
even using these tools, you can, or even AI tools to get suggestions, you can reference your instructional materials and, take ideas or even tasks from your materials and ask for scaffold ideas or ask for extension ideas that can make it more engaging for kids or more address their needs better. Um, in the chat, if you could tell us where is STEAM in your school? Is the M silent? Do your instructional materials include opportunities for students to integrate these subjects? You can come off mute or type in the chat. And a few people typing, so we'll wait. I see the M is present. I love it. That takes some intentionality. I think we can go to the next slide. This is just a review of where we've been. So we gave you a chance to reflect on your memorable math stories. We've talked about our current context in Oregon, a little bit about what's coming. We've looked at the transformative social emotional uh, framework and specifically some math resources. We looked at the adolescent literacy framework. Adolescent Literacy Framework. We looked at the STEAM toolkit. And then our last question for you is what does this look like in the future? So we can go to the next slide. And if you think about what math story do you want your students to tell? What might that look like? At the very least, we hope everyone can say, I am a math person. Stop saying it the other way. And then in the slides that were put in the chat earlier are our email addresses and then links to all of those resources. So we really appreciate you spending this time with us. We know it is Friday afternoon, and we hope that you found something useful, and we'd love to see any questions in the chat or anything that describes what you want for your students or anything that you found helpful that you're going to tell someone else about. Sometimes I measure the success of a session by how many open tabs I have when it's over. So I hope you have lots of open tabs and had enough detail to take some things right away.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the chance to share. Feel free to reach out as well. Look for, the math tab's coming for instructional material for the instructional frameworks, and so I can tell my crystal ball says I think you might see the focus, engagement, pathways, and belonging in those chapters. So look for more resources and expanding on those ideas as we develop out the math framework this next year.